Welcome to the AutoSuccess Executive Spotlight. I'm your host, Brian Ankney. Today my guest is Ted Rubin. He's the president and CEO of ActivEngage. Welcome, Ted.
Hey, thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Cool. Well, let's talk about the trends that you're seeing right now. What trends are you seeing in like dealer to consumer, conversations? What's changing?
Well, I think that there's been a lot of conversations, obviously, over the years that have been digitized, and they went from email, early on, and we've been around for about 15 years. We were one of the first in the industry, actually, the first to do actually managed services in the industry. So that's been about 15 years, and we've seen the conversations matriculate, become much more savvy. The customers, have more to expect early on. As we were talking about early on, customers were just verifying we were actually like a person and not that they were just talking to a machine. So they were asking us about the scores in the baseball game the night before or other things like that, like what the weather's like and stuff, just to make sure that they were talking to a live person. They wanted to talk to somebody live. But as they got more familiar with it, as they got more accustomed to interacting with dealers on their websites in that way, the questions become much more pertinent. The conversations are more about accommodating the customer. A lot of times the customers are asking questions. They're not exactly sure what they're driving to. They have an idea of what they're trying to accomplish. They're not physically in the store touching the car. So they do need someone who can actually guide them through the conversation. We've had so many conversations that we ultimately know generally from the context, where they're trying to get to and what they're trying to accomplish, so we can shortcut that and, bring them to a solution or to an answer, much more quickly, just simply because we understand what they're driving toward. But there's a lot of required interaction, during these conversations. What we've found more recently is customers aren't just going online to just gather pure information. They're looking for an advocate. They're looking for someone to engage with, someone who's going to be on their side, essentially, who can help answer questions about process, who can make them feel good about the process of buying a car and about the car that they're buying or that they're interested in buying. So what we've seen is this migration from early on where it was, I don't really want to search around the website to get data, so I'm going to ask you about data. And now what we're finding is that they're actually coming online if they're interacting, because the websites have made it a lot easier to gather data. And what they're really coming online to do is to actually have interaction and ask questions about, do you like the car? What do you think about this versus that? They want interaction.
Are you saying somebody comes on, they say, I'm really looking for a pickup truck, but I haven't decided between this one and this one. I like to go surfing and fishing, and but I've got 2 kids. Which one of these would you recommend that I?
That's right. Yeah, they're looking for recommendations a lot of times. I mean, not exclusively. They're still asking about data, a decent amount, but they're asking about recommendations. They're asking about how the process is going to work. They want to feel comfortable, so you have to give some empathy. It has to be a human conversation. We want to humanize the conversation so that the customer's at ease about it. Buying a car is tense, and it still takes a long time to buy a car, and you're, in front of someone at the store who is an expert and who's done this. And a lot of times customers, I think dealers have gotten much better about, being very endorsing of the customer experience and understanding that customers have this tense kind of tight interaction and that it feels adversarial, so they want to ease the pain of that. But I think that it starts all the way when you're online, and so that the customer's looking for some compassion, they're looking for some empathy, they're looking to know that you have a pulse and that you feel for them in this process, and the ability to recognize that you're talking to another human being, and that they understand the trials and tribulations of what you're going through as you're migrating through this process, and them making you aware of that. It really helps to ease a lot of the angst with that, and it does motivate the customers, to want to go to that store and to buy from that particular dealer more than just, you want the data, here's the data, I'll give you data. And it's like talking to someone in the store. Most salespeople, most great salespeople are quite animated and they're quite engaged with the customer. And that doesn't mean you don't have to do it online, and that even though you're not looking at the customer necessarily and not seeing them, they still want to feel like you're really a part of this process and that you're engaged with them. It has a huge impact on their psychology when they're looking to help motivate them to keep moving forward, and then also to continue through with the dealer that they're talking to.
You know, that kind of surprises me a little bit. I would have thought that most of the customers were asking, do you have that car? How much is that car? What's my payment on that car? How much can I get for my trade? I hadn't really thought about guiding them to which car or which trim level. I mean, do you actually see people that come on looking for a four-door car and then decide that they need a four-door SUV or a pickup truck? I mean, do you see much of that where they switch models?
I don't know that they switch drastically. So I don't know that they'll switch from a four-door to a small sport coupe, but that happens too. It depends on what happens during that engagement, right? So it's about asking questions and really hearing what those answers are. More to the point, I think, of what you're asking is that to gather what's the price or what's the payment or do you have the car. I think that website providers have done a great job of making all of that come right to the front and present on the website. And I think that consumers are getting savvy with the fact that, okay, what I'm seeing for the most part is, close to accurate or pretty accurate. And, as I'm going through the actual sales process, which you can now do significantly online, then, I'll get kind of down to the meat and potatoes. I understand that I have to have credit if I'm going to buy it on credit or if I'm going to buy it through lease. So those questions, they certainly still happen, but they're not as prevalent as they used to be. What is prevalent when you're talking to someone is I'm looking for a four-door that's going to accommodate these things. Can you tell me which one you have that's the best in that area? Or I'm looking for this model, but I want something with a little bit more luxury, or I want the one that has these types of features, and we can help guide them, specifically within that model range to that. Sometimes they just say, I need a car and I have X amount of dollars to spend, and can you recommend something that you have on the lot? And we'll be able to navigate the inventory for them to be able to start presenting cars. We also give them options so they can ask for a specific car, and we'll give them an option for one or two other ones that may be in line, and they can say, yes, I'm interested in all of these, or no, I want to stay focused in one area. And that helps to focus the customer too. So if you do make a presentation to a customer, it's no different than selling in the store. If you make a presentation to a customer and they accept other alternatives, then you know what breadth you have with them that you can kind of navigate around. Maybe they're not so close to the sale yet. You want to be more interactive about what's their process and what's their timeline. If you present some other things to them, and they're like, no, I know I want this vehicle, they're closer to the sale, that you have a much narrower path. You want to start talking about moving them forward in that process, into a digital retailing tool if they have one on the website. Or specifically getting into the store to meet a particular person so that they can go further down that process because they've nailed that down. Now it's just about endorsing necessarily that particular car that they've picked, as opposed to giving them some breadth and saying, oh, I like all three of these and all of these would fit. What is it more that you're trying to achieve with this car? Is it price? Is it size? Is it something that's brand new that hasn't been owned before? There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of interaction and a lot of questions to ask, just like in the store, to be able to do the best job for the customer. To get the better job that you do for the customer, the more successful you are in the conversation, the easier the process is for them. And that's what you're trying to accomplish, because if it's easy for them, they'll buy from you. If they feel like it's going to be complicated, difficult, if they feel like you're uninterested in them, it's just very sharp and it's a data-only thing, then they're not necessarily going to be buying from you because there's nothing tying them to you.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like getting them engaged with the person that they're communicating with online is important. How do you support the transfer? If the person, to a digital retailing tool, that's probably pretty simple. But to take them actually to coming into the dealership, how do you help to support that transfer?
Well, and even for the digital retailing, it depends. We have to build these integrations with these digital retailing tools. And so we build deep into these tools so that we can tell what's going on with the tool. So we know where they are in the process. We know what they're doing. We can actually answer quite specific questions about what's happening in the process with where they are in the digital retailing tools. Also, just migrating someone into a digital retailing tool. A lot of times you're in a conversation with someone and you start asking questions and they'll say, oh, well, can you tell me what it's going to be for me? What's my monthly payment going to be? And we say, oh, well, I can start taking you through that process. You don't have to do anything, but I can start taking you through that process if you like. And then we can just organically migrate someone into a digital retailing tool. A lot of times, I think there's a mistake or a misunderstanding maybe of how digital retailing tools get used sometimes, because certainly there are people who will go online now and they know that they exist on dealership websites, and they're like, I'm just going to go do it that way, which is terrific. But there's many, many more times where you're just speaking with the customer. And again, it's just like being in the store. That's the experience we're trying to replicate, is being in the store. Give a similar experience, because they can't touch it, they can't feel it. So you're trying to substitute through conversation and maybe video or pictures or other things that that we can do with the messaging piece, so that they get a premium and similar experience and enhance those other imaginary or senses in their mind, their perception of what things are, because they can't actually physically touch the metal, feel how cold it is, feel how sharp and nice and new and clean and all those things that it is. And so you want to be able to do those things. So as you're navigating through a conversation, you would just say, do you want to go to this step? And if they do, then you can start moving them into digital retailing. Whereas someone who came online like that, they're still preliminary. They won't click on digital retailing because they're like, I'm not there yet. But if I'm talking to you and I said, oh, but I can give you this additional information, but I need to take you a little bit further, is that okay? Then you're getting the okay from them and they're asking to be put through that. And that's where you really, I think, have a tremendous amount of success. And then moving them into the store, we like to have a specific point of contact, names, days even, that we can assign people to meet with an individual or look for an individual, even if it's a greeter at the store. Better if it can be an F&I manager because they've gotten through the digital retailing piece, or a salesperson or a sales manager, and they just have to be there. I think that the process in the dealership should be, hey, you need to come out and just meet this person and shake their hand and put them with a live person. That small 10-second experience is everything to a customer when they're walking into a store and they're unsure of exactly how things are going to go. To feel like, oh, this is exactly what they told me it was going to be. These people care about me. They're paying attention. It did follow through the way that I was told when I was online. And that has a huge impact on customer service, your ability to close the deal, the satisfaction that the customer has with the way that it all transpired, and your success in actually, completing a transaction.
Wow. So like when you're communicating with them online, you're really providing them with the same experience that they would have if they were sitting across from a salesperson. I mean, you're guiding them through the steps of the digital retailing process, answering questions along the way, almost identical to what would happen if I was a salesman and you were buying a car from me and we were sitting here doing it together right now in person, right?
Yeah, I think that's what we're trying to replicate. We're trying to actually be even better than that, right? Sometimes because, the one thing that we do get is, we're sitting at a computer, so we have access to all of the data. So we take in all kinds of data points about why is your dealership special. So when we're onboarding a dealer, why is your dealership special? What's unique about it? What offerings do you have? What does it look like? What's the surrounding area? So if we had to give directions, do I tell them to turn right on 5th Street, or can I tell them to turn right at the Starbucks? Things like that. So we want to understand who our dealers are, why they're special, what they do that's helpful for the customer. Are they about price? Are they about warranties? Are they about tires for life? Are they about, what is the thing that they specifically stand on, and what matters to the dealer in their community? And so, being able to convey all that, and then we have access to all the vehicle data. So not every salesperson can remember every aspect of every vehicle, but if we're in messaging with someone, then we can look up any vehicle and we can know what the specs are on that vehicle and what on that vehicle, going back years, right? And it's nice to be able. We do get a lot of questions that are, I'm interested in this truck, but I need to know how long it is because I need to know if it's going to fit in my garage. So we have that at our fingertips, and our reps are looking at all the data. And even if the dealer is doing it themselves, so if they're not contracting with us to actually handle the conversations, and there's people in the store like the BDC doing that, then our console gives the agents in the store the ability to see all this information and to be able to access all this data, right? So that they can be as effective as we are at answering those kinds of questions and bringing all of that to the forefront to make sure it gets communicated to the customer in an effective way.
Cool. Let's move around to the back of the building, or the side of the building, depends on the dealership. Let's talk about service. How does managed messaging help the service department in the dealership?
Well, I think there's a lot of ways. One of the obvious first ways is as 24/7. So people, think I did it the other day. I was like, I have to take my car in. I forgot to do anything about it today. The dealership's closed. So if I can engage, through messaging on the website or through texting or whatever, to be able to just say, hey, I want to make an appointment. Can I do that? And there's someone there who has access, and they can actually see the appointment schedule, the real schedule, even offer, different certain primary types of services that they know that are consistent with customers, and say, this is what this is going to cost, this is how long it's going to take, these are the things that are going on. Then that's really an effective way to not only assist the customer, but alleviate a lot of the calls that come in, at 7:30 in the morning the next day, because everybody's like, I woke up and I thought about this last night after you closed and I got to make that appointment. And so, we've seen where there's so many calls coming in that it'll just peg the phone system, and you won't even be able to get to all the calls that are coming in because there's just not enough people to handle them, right? So this way you can advertise this to customers, they'll get familiar with it. We have interactions with most all of the service scheduling tools. So we know not just what the schedule is, but if it's a transmission replacement, we know how to schedule that compared to like an oil change, and we can schedule that and have it be exactly the right time, for the customer and for the dealership to show up. And it's an easier way to be able to accomplish the appointment setting or verifying if your car is done, right? So you can just go online and go, hey, is my car done? And we can answer a lot of those questions about it. I think that also, just the mere fact that it does alleviate that stress on the phone system is a very big deal. Plus, we do things the same way on a consistent basis. So, we'll get with your dealership in the same way, and we'll identify, what do you sell and what are the things about, the way that you want to handle service and how do you want us to communicate things. The same way you would explain it to a new ASM on the floor. And so, because every conversation is written, every conversation is, being managed by our team, we make sure that things are consistently done in the most effective way. So we're evaluating all these conversations. We're making sure that that things are being done correctly, but also saying, okay, well, did the customer stay engaged? Did they not stay engaged? Did they do what we asked them to do, or did they segue off to something else? So we can continually improve those, and that's why the average RO that's made from one of our messaging reps is about 30% higher than the ROs that would normally be done on the website. And it's even about 10% higher than the ROs that would be made if they had called into the store.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's 30% is a big number.
It's a big number. Yeah.
So having somebody there to help you or hold your hand through the process makes a tremendous difference.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's all about, it's all about this human touch and about the interaction with another person, and it's about, all this stuff. Anybody who's been in sales for a long time, it's about relationships, right? It's like building that relationship, making you comfortable with me selling you something. If you're not comfortable with me selling you something, you're always going to be at odds with me. You're not going to believe me. You're always going to have another question. You're always going to have some angst about the relationship or about whatever I'm telling you. But if I can make you at ease with me, make you feel comfortable, make you feel like, hey, look, I'm interested in in your success in this transaction, and you getting what you want and making sure that your questions are answered. If I can do that, then you'll have trust with me, and then I can help you navigate this pretty difficult transaction with much more ease and much more confidence, and therefore you'll want to continue all the way through that process.
I guess that makes sense. It has to be a much better customer experience than, ring, 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 like 6 or 7 rings, oh yeah, transfer me to service. And then you get to service, ring, 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 and then you leave a voicemail.
That's right.
And then maybe somebody calls you back, maybe they don't, so you call back again. And, by that point, I'm probably not looking to add more things to my RO.
That's right.
I'm not in a good mood. So.
Well, I mean, you're creating an adversarial relationship. So think about the temperature, just think about the body temperature of the person who's trying to make an appointment and can't get through and can't get in, and it takes them several times, and every time that they dial and something doesn't happen. And it's the same on the sales con. Every time that they ask a question and all they get is another question back, or they don't get the answer that they're looking for, or they get a bot who's just not trained to understand what's going on, and it's not asking the right question, then you can just, if you had a thermometer that was in that customer's mouth, you could just watch it rise.
Yeah.
You're just pissing them off as you go. So that's really the goal. I think you and I talked about this a little bit earlier. That originally 15 years ago, when it was primarily just chat and it didn't have to do with messaging across the board, didn't have to do with texting and other things that were going on, then there was a lot of people who just, I don't want to navigate the website to find the data. And websites were more complicated, and so they would interact with chat to be able to help you find the thing that you were looking for. Mm-hmm. And that still happens, but not nearly as much. More what's happening now is they're looking for this advocate. Like, that's what we want to be. We want to be the advocate. Yeah. And so they're looking for this person who can help them more understand the process and be on their side. They want to feel like you have an interest in them, that you want them to have an easy time in this process, that you are trying to help them. That's what you're there for. If they don't feel that, if they feel like you are just a resource for data, or if they feel like you're just there to take information and someone else who's got the data can contact you later, well, then they're just going to disengage, or they're going to put up a wall, or you're going to have a lot more problems interacting with that customer, and it's going to make navigating that sales process much more complicated.
We have another brand at Babcock's called The Buzz. It covers all things EVs, and EVs are touching the motorcycles and the power sports from our motorcycle power sports news. It's touching the fleets from our fleet equipment, and it's definitely touching cars. I mean, EVs are here. How many of your conversations are touching on EVs, and are they more educational, or are they more, do you have them, or like what does that kind of look like?
Well, I mean, a lot of the conversations, right now the conversations about cars are, do you have them? So as much as anything, that's pretty common. So I don't know that separating the two, that I can separate the two just because of the environment at this particular point in time. But what I can tell you is that there's so many manufacturers now that have EVs or have them coming, that it's more about looking at an EV as like a new model in the lineup of the vehicles that are there. They're not specifically saying, well, how does an EV work? Or, sometimes they'll ask questions like, what do I need to be able to purchase this car? How do I charge it? What do I need to put in my garage? And other things like that. So there are some questions around it like that. But we don't really have to get that much into the detail. I mean, you're looking at a much more savvy consumer, I think, in general. Mm-hmm. And I think the ones that look for EVs are even more savvy, just typically because they're researching and trying to find out, because it's still, we're well into development of EVs, but it's still newer to the public. So the people who are desirous of those things and looking for those types of vehicles, they're capable of doing, more research about it. Mm-hmm. The conversation has become more about, well, I'm just interested in this vehicle as a new model at this particular brand. Can you tell me a little bit, like what are the features of it, or, can I get leather seats, or are they, leatherette, or can I get different features like a pop-up display, or can I get, different types of lighting or other things like that. So it's more about the specifics of the vehicle in the same trend that it would be if any new model came out. than it is specifically about the EVs. We just do see that there's a lot more interaction about EVs, but it's just because of the excitement of new model lines, which are these EVs across all the brands that there are.
So it's more questions about, is it comfortable for two adults in the back seat, or can I get third row seating? It's the same questions that
it's the same questions.
It's just a different motor.
Right. That's exactly correct.
These days video is everywhere. How are you using video in your business today?
Well, we released a product just recently that's called MyDrive, and I think it's a spectacular product to be used, along with the messaging that we have for the stores on the websites. And what this tool does is, we want to create that excitement, as we talked about earlier, about being in the store and kind of you can't touch the car and you can't feel the car and things like that. So what we've done is that from the chat window itself that the consumer is looking at, so as we land on a car for them, then we can slide out a video player window from that. So it's not covering the website and it's not taking up your entire screen, but while you're in the communication with the rep, that you can actually watch a test drive of the video or watch content from the manufacturer, from the dealership, whatever, that we can place into this player content that's attached to the chat window. And the goal there is, number one, we don't want to disrupt the conversation because ultimately we want to be able to get through this conversation and the customer wants to get through the conversation, get the answers they're looking for. But we do want to get the customer excited about the purchase, just like they were in the store. So, there's something about looking at the cars that have just been cleaned and washed and they're sitting on the showroom floor and they're all shiny and they have the lights on them and you go up to them and you're like, oh, that's awesome. And you can get that feeling with a lot of the video content that's out there. That's why they have commercials, right? And so you watch these commercials, you're like, oh, I really want to get that car. And so we can put all of that content now into this video player that is actually a part of the messaging window. And we can slide it out and we can have the customer watching that and at the same time still directly interacting with the chat without disrupting that. And so it gives them that, or we expect that it'll give them that excitement. They'll be watching the car that I'm going to buy this car and look at all the cool stuff that it does, or look at the inside, or look how much room there is, or how fast it is, or I'm going to have to take it down that mountain road, or whatever it may be. So, that's the goal of it is, to really bring that into the conversation and give them something that they can watch and that can get them excited, but it also shouldn't be all-consuming where it's actually disrupting the conversation to the point of where it's extending it for a long time or taking them out of, you don't want them to lose track of what they're talking about because they want to get through it. So. I think it's a great tool that we can use, and we can even, get it to be specific to like individual dealer groups and other things like that, where they can have their specific content, that we're able to show, whether it's relative to the store or relative to other areas of the dealerships that they have that they want to promote to the customer in a way that also gets them excited or gets them very aware of how they're going to interact with the store and how things are going to go. And that's what you want, right? You want that customer, like we talked about, to kind of have that faith in it, that trust.
Yeah, I mean, the video definitely gets you emotional. I mean, that's why manufacturers don't have just a bunch of slides of what the cars look like on their commercials, right? That's why the cars, it's doing the mountain road, or it's running down the beach, or it's slowly climbing a rock.
It's always somewhere where you want to be, right?
Yeah. It's never like in the line to pick up your kids after school.
That's right. You never see that.
That's the Allstate commercial where the lady wrecks or something.
Right, but they're not advertising the car, so that's exactly right. Oh, that's funny.
Well, what other ways are you using video today?
We have another product that we've had for a while, but it's been enhanced and kind of beefed up a little bit, and it's the two-way video. So you'll actually be able to have an interaction with a live agent, and you can see the agent, and the consumer can either block themselves or allow the agent to see them, and there can be an interaction. And that can be recorded as well on the agent side, not on the consumer side. But so the agent can show the store or show the lot or talk about the interaction. anything that the agent is doing, can be actually shot with their camera on their phone or whatever and recorded, and then either stored for a use at a later point, or used for training and other things like that as well. There's not a lot of, we've had two-way interaction for a while, and it's just a little early for consumers to really want that. We've done a bunch of tests. We've done tests with some of the manufacturers and even some of the distributors, and there's been long conversation about, this is what customers want, and we're not seeing that heavy desire there right now. But I think there is a place for it, and I think that as digital retailing kind of moves a little bit more forward, like I foresee that, where this is going to get used, which is why we're kind of putting it out, is going to be a little bit more maybe, with some of the bigger sites that are out there, it'll get used. And I also think it's going to get used in F&I, right? So again, not so that the consumer necessarily wants to be seen, but they may want to see your F&I manager. So as you're going through DR, we can transfer it directly into the store and transfer it directly to an individual in the store. So we can transfer a customer that's going through the DR process, if they're really significantly through it or need to be speaking to someone with more detail because of some complexity in the process itself, then we can transfer it to an F&I manager that's in the store, and they can take it over, and the consumer will be sitting across the desk from the F&I manager in the store, right? And that person will also have the same access that we do to tell where they are in the process, what they're doing. The DR tool itself, because we have these exclusive arrangements with different DR tools, so we're pervasive throughout Cox, and obviously we're on AutoTrader, and Accelerate is one of the products that we interact with quite deeply. Darwin and ShopClick Drive for General Motors, we're essentially exclusive for them, and so we have very deep interactions with these DR products so that the F&I managers will know through the conversation and can interact with the customer, and then these DR products will be giving them right to their DMS exactly what the customer is doing and how they're making it through the process and what the details of that transaction are. So I think that that's quite significant to be able to offer that. And we could be a little bit on the early stage of that, but I think that some progressive dealers are going to want to make that offering, and there will be customers who will take people up on that.
Yeah, well, we have a saying at Babcock that we'd rather be 2 years too early than 5 minutes too late.
Yeah.
And so it's always better to get there early.
Yeah, it's always better
than to try to catch up later. Well, Ted, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience today?
I think the one thing that going back to the very first question that you asked, I think that what's important to know, at least from my perspective and our perspective at ActivEngage, about interacting with customers is you don't want to stray too far from the original process itself, right, of understanding how to sell a customer. And that's to build a relationship. So you have to get interactive with the customer. You have to be real about what you're doing. You have to have interest in the customer. You have to have empathy for the customer so that you can build this relationship. If there is no relationship, then there's no reason for this customer to buy from you. Why would they want to do that? Anybody who's going to buy anything from anyone is because they feel like there's a relationship there. Even Amazon, which is an off-the-shelf type of product, they have a relationship, with Amazon because they have a feeling, they understand how it works, they feel comfortable buying in there. Sometimes they'll pay more for products because it's delivered, it's free, it seems like it's easy, they can research a lot of things all at once. So it is significantly about the relationship, and buying a car is just such a complex process, and there's so many companies and people that are trying to make it simpler and faster, but it is still inevitably a long and complex process with a lot of rules and a lot of regulations that are regional as well as federal. And what the customer really needs is to be comfortable and to get their questions answered and to feel like the interaction that they're having is on their behalf. Okay, so I think the best way to do that is to build a relationship and to build that interaction through trust and through answering questions and being empathetic to the customer. And that's what our goal is with all of the customers that we interact with on all of the different sites that ActivEngage is on.
Well, thank you, Ted.
No, thank you. It was great being here, and I really enjoyed my time.
It was a good time.
Yeah, it was.
Thank you for taking the time to join us for this AutoSuccess Executive Spotlight. I'm your host, Brian Ankney. Today my guest was Ted Rubin from ActivEngage. This episode is over the curb and burning gas, unless it's an EV.